Alright, good evening, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Escape 2. Still just blocking in color and starting to layer up glazes for some light absorption. So today I'm going to go pretty much edge to edge with a yellow glaze and then work on the clouds with some pure opaque white and then blend in the sky with a little more atmospheric haze created by the glaze and then hit it the center with a more opaque deep blue. So here we go.
He knew how to do the thing to make an ordinary trip turn into the forever trip by locking these molecules into their bond sites. Oh, and that's the piece of the puzzle that I didn't explain that you might not realize. When a molecule is superconducting, when a molecule is at 0 degrees absolute, it becomes superconducting. So if you can cool a molecule to that level, it will immediately bond permanently to whatever is physically nearby. So Dennis said, what you do is you take all these, you saturate your body with these drug molecules, and then using a complex theory of harmonic canceling, which I won't regale you with this evening, he thought there was a way to generate sound that would affect a very small number of these drug molecules and cause them actually to superconductively bond into the DNA. And then the trip would be permanent. The trip would be scripted into the genome, or at least for the life of the organism. And he suggested that if you make the DNA superconducting in this way, that eventually death is no problem. It's just sort of like a shedding. And you go into the rivers and the water and the air, and you become very tiny. You become the size of your DNA nucleus. Well, I thought that this was a very highly unlikely notion. So unlikely that since he was so gung-ho to try it, the best thing to do would be to just let it rip. And if there was something there, that would be interesting, but that I was willing to bet dollars to donuts against it. Well, he set up the experiment, he did the experiment, and he had made very extravagant and inflated predictions about what would happen. He thought that you would literally give birth to your mind as a physical substance. I don't know whether it would flow out of your nose or where it would come from, but he thought that there was a kind of superconducting, translinguistic matter, he called it. He thought there was a way to dissolve the boundaries between matter and spirit and create an obsidian fluid that would be obedient to your own imagination, that would in fact be you. You would just preserve your body as a convenient reference point, but you would actually become this stuff. I'm telling you. So I thought, sure, so try it. So, yeah, what's to lose? We didn't come all this way for nothing. You say you know what you're doing. Nobody else has a clue, so go for it. Well, what happened was not what he predicted, but not nothing. And that was the great puzzlement of this experience, because what happened was immediately after this procedure was carried out, I could tell that something had changed in me. And it was very hard. It took me a few hours to figure out what it was. And what it was it was as though a switch had been thrown. And I began to understand. That's all it was. It was, Whitehead defines understanding as the apperception of pattern as such. And suddenly, began seeing things very differently. I began to see the relationships between things on one level and among levels. And I stopped sleeping. I didn't sleep for 11 days, effortlessly. And every night during this 11 days, in the late evening, I would just become very, very impatient for all these people to go to bed, my companions, because the chatter of the camp would interrupt my thoughts. And what I just wanted to do was I would just go in the jungle and I would just put my hand on a tree and I would just stand and think and think and think and think and think. And it was this endless cascade. It was not like a psychedelic trip. There was no hallucination. There was simply this unfoldment. And it was like as though I was just filled to overflowing with gnosis. I would sit down on this ground and begin thinking, and I would lose myself in my thoughts. And when I would come back to my situation, I would look down in front of myself and see that while I had been thinking, my hands had built a fire out of small sticks. It was as though everything was cognitive activity. Dennis went what would be conventionally called a psychotic episode, but it wasn't a typical psychotic episode. It was a kind of turning inside out, so that he became, he in a single moment after the hypercarbylation, it was like he ended up at the other end of the universe, turned inside out and headed backwards. And over the next 14 days, he came through a progressive narrowing of his, what he was identifying with. So that first it was the whole universe, then it was the galaxy, then the solar system, then each of the planets moving in, then all life on Earth, then all mammals, then all human beings, then all Irish, then finally all the McKennas there ever were, and then finally the question was he him or me? And then he got that sorted out finally, and then he was fine. Shaken, but fine. We've now reached the 22nd of March, 1971, and I was just, I couldn't talk to anybody. I was in a very, 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 very strange place, and things went on. Well, just as an example, because there wasn't much of this 3D stuff that you could wrap your mind around, but everything was teaching me. Everything had a message for me. And I would go out into the jungle, and I would raise my arms above my head, and I would call the butterflies into me out of the jungle. And they would come, first by dozens and then by hundreds. And I would stand there, and here's how the thought progression would go. I would call the butterflies in, and then it would move me to tears. And so there I am, standing, covered with butterflies, tears of joy streaming down my face, and streaming down my face, and streaming down my face. And finally I begin thinking, so now what? And then I think, the people back at the camp who doubt me, those bastards, wait till they see this. So then I would go to the camp, and I would be smiling, the tiny smile that only Buddhas can manage, and I would invite them into the jungle to see something unannounced. And so they would say, well, I don't know, you're just, all right, we'll go. So then we would go into the jungle, and I would raise my hands above my head, and I would call the butterflies in, and none would come. And these people would just say, Oh, God. It's getting worse and worse and worse. Your brother is nuts. You have delusions of This is pathetic. I mean, this is a mind in wreckage. This is the green hell. This is the thing we feared the most, you know? And so eventually, and any of you who are self-diagnosed as schizophrenic will agree with me on this, I'm sure. The key to surviving schizophrenia in one piece and avoiding massive intervention by the mental health care authorities is shut up. Shut up about it. Do not talk about it. Of course you can raise the dead and heal the sick and divine distant event, but just shut up about it, or you're not going to make it through. Well, eventually, everybody else sort of renegotiated themselves back to some kind of reality. My brother flew back to the States, and I was, in a sense, left in the Amazon to mull all this. So is there unfinished business from last night? Yeah.
Was the voice that was directing you on the time wave stuff, is this something that's under the influence you hear this voice, or is just your natural, you just hear this voice whenever?
Well, it's sort of, we talked last night about if Dennis had this notion that he could bond these molecules in permanently. And, everybody you only get to be one person, so it's very hard to know what it's like to stand in someone else's shoes. But going into that experience in the Amazon, I was a fairly disorganized. I don't think I had a very bright future, actually. And I spent my last dime to get in there. So there was essentially, it was some kind of heart of darkness thing where I was just pulling out all the plugs and sinking deeper and deeper. And since then, my life has the character of pure science fiction. I mean, I sort of became the alien ambassador. And was given a sinecure and appointed to then, mediate between the other and a certain kind of person in a certain kind of society. So the weirdness never leaves me, to answer your question. But in a sense, this idea is completed now. There are always unanswered questions, but the complete metaphor is there. The mystery, I think, is, it has two sides. It has a profound side and an absurd side. The profound side is, is the world tidally locked with an extra-dimensional object of some sort that has sucked an animal species into history and is, revealing itself through the transformation of our flesh and machines? And if not, on this schedule of 2012 and so forth, then what does this idea exist for? Is it just simply that I have a peculiar pathology married to a certain amount of charisma, so instead of being locked up and dragged away, I can turn it into a marketable product in a very marginal way that allows me to keep paying my phone bill and stuff like that? Is that what it is? Notice that the idea is not designed to last. It's designed to auto-destruct one way or the other in 2012. So this whole ideological vision has written all over it, perishable, apply immediately, do not use after December 22nd, 2012 AD. So I don't really understand much about what's going on. It seems to me there are levels and levels and veils and veils. It puzzles me that life seems to have become some kind of story. It's much more a literary construct than it is the product of the stochastic motions of atoms under the impingement of the four basic forces of physics. Everything appears to me to be authored in some strange way. And I wonder if this is not, the spreading assumption of the psychedelic illusion, delusion, revelation, that life is in fact art in some very profound way. And then, being somehow fated to literature and the spoken and written word, I wonder, if this is a novel, if this is a construct of artifice, well then it behooves each one of us to ask the question, who am I in the plot? Who am I in the context of the story? I mean, maybe it's your story, the Shlomo Ekbach story, or maybe you exist to draw the bath for Milady on page 220 and then bow your way out of the room, never to be heard of again in the story. That wonderful line in Prufrock, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be, am an attendant lord, will do to start a scene, swell a procession, advise the prince. Careful, obtuse, meticulous, at times a bit ridiculous. Anyway, are you that person, or are you Prince Hamlet? And then the question becomes, if you, the character in this literary construct, are slowly becoming aware that it's a literary construct, then is that part of the plot? Is this a story about a sort of Pirandello-esque exposition of the levels of personality as we rise into awareness that we are caged by artifice? Or are you getting out from under the control of the author? I sort of think that, one thing that I've sort of discovered as my career has gone through its circuitous and glacial advancement is that as you make your way into what are called the corridors of power, you discover they're remarkably uncrowded and there are no waiting lines at the water fountains. There doesn't seem to be anybody really running the show above the level which just makes sure that UPS delivers on time. Above there, where you would think there would be, in the captain's tower, there's a kind of eerie emptiness. And I think that means that one can aspire upward in this matter of taking a little bit more control of the plot. And that the goal is not so much to advance your character, act out your character, and by brilliant marriages or daring military campaigns or feats of investment genius to somehow begin to take over the stage. This isn't the way to move the evolution of the personality. The way to move the evolution of the personality is toward empathy and eventual assimilation of the viewpoint of the author. The author is the one who is in charge of the pattern and has some kind of a vision, which, if the author knows what she or he is doing, this is all being woven toward a hierophany, a catharsis that illuminates, educates, leaves us in a better place. And I think the payoff on this is if you become the author is sort of in the position of a programmer. The author can save or destroy any character. So if you become the author, you can write an ending that will save your character from the destruction that was inevitably built into it for you to get into this mess in the first place. You see? So it's now what lies behind such raving as this? Can this coffee really be that strong?
When you were in the journal, Dennis had his 14-day psychotic episode or whatever it was. Did you take the same drug that you did? Did you both do the same thing?
Well, very shortly after we got into it, he didn't do any drugs. Because it was perfectly clear that he had no need of them. The way it worked was we had a series of mushroom trips. Well, we had walked all this way through the jungle, and later I had occasion to walk that trail again, 110 clicks. And it was so difficult the second time that I had to face the fact that the first time we had actually had like wings on our feet or something. We accomplished an impossible physical feat without even noticing we were doing it. I mean, and then when we got there, we had a series of mushroom trips, and on the third mushroom trip, we were talking in the hut. It was in the middle of the night, and he was saying how he regretted that he hadn't been able to reach our father by telephone before he left for Colombia, because he hadn't been able to really say goodbye properly. And it was, this kind of unsettled trip. And we were all sitting in hammocks in darkness. And you could hear a Witoto walking on the trail because his transistor radio was on. You always know when an Amazon Indian is nearby because they're tuned to, anyway. So, not El Paso. So we could hear this Indian with his transistor radio winding up the trail toward us. I remember it was an ad for Costeña, la cerveza más mejor de Colombia. And then as it came and faded, then Dennis made this very strange noise, which was like a metallic, a very strange noise. And it was like that was really for him the moment. It came in a moment. And then we talked, and he was agitated all night long, and he kept wanting to go down the hill to where these other people were sleeping, and by morning he was saying, you know what we could do with this? And then he just laid out this whole theory of molecular canceling and molecular intercalation. But drugs had a surprisingly little amount to do with it once he caught the wave. We went through this whole thing at La Chorrera and left at the end of March. And the woman I was with and I stayed in Colombia another month. Everybody else went back. And we wrestled with it another month. And I was quite out of it, I think. I believed that she would give birth to the word itself. And I believed that it would be a little glass fiance bead that I had lost in Laos 5 years earlier. And when she began to develop a round sore on the top of her mouth that was exactly the size of this thing, then I realized that this little object would drop down onto her tongue someday soon, and she would deliver it to me, and that it would be the Word made flesh. It would be the... Now are you alarmed? Now do you begin to get the drift that we've attempted to suppress so long? And you know, I thought that this thing would essentially be a suitable second body, a reposit. I can't explain it. I mean, it was the philosopher's stone. It was everything. We were nuts, let's face it. But on the other hand, there was concentrically surrounding this whole thing, there were immense synchronicities. I mean, the world around us seemed to be mad as well. It seemed like we were caught in the infundibulum of the concrescence or something. I mean, it's now what I would expect to happen just days or hours before the final closure on that wave that we looked at last night. But in our local domain, it seemed to be happening for us then. And you know, we just...
Alright, well that gets the cloud work a bit more solidly
It took me years and years to dial
rendered.
it down so that it's even as
Glare is pretty rough right there from this angle,
packageable
actually.
as it is in the present
I'll put up
moment,
a still
because
shot.
For a long time, it wasn't. I mean, it just drove people to the walls. I mean, they just said, "I don't know, and I don't want to
I
hear
should
it,
have
and I've
anticipated
had
that.
it, and call
Hold
me
on, let
when
me see if
you're
I can swing it
better."
around for a better view. How's that?
Well, we did brew ayahuasca and take it, but I think having seen it, having lived with shamans since then, and having learned a lot more about ayahuasca.
Alright, I don't think I'm going to be able to cut that glare from this angle, actually. I'm going to have to do some light adjustment for the next session so I can try and fix that. But anyway, that's it for the moment. I think I'll pop the tripod off, actually. Pop this off the tripod. Walk it over so I can aim it without the glare. So we've got a minute 30 seconds left in this memory clip, so let's see here. Alright. There's Eidolon. She says hi. She's disgruntled because I'm making her stay in. She came in at like 2 in the morning last night. Bad cat. It's a bad cat. Yeah. Alright. Being a cat seems to be her thing. Alright, so there's that. That sets the background up better. I think I'm going to do another layer or two before I start figuring out placement of the elements that will compose the ground. But that's it for now. So thank you for watching. That's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Escape 2.
Shamanism is of this fluid, this stuff, which you can generate out of your body under the influence of these
Have a good night, Earth.
compounds